Welcome everybody to today's episode of the Empowered Performance podcast. This is an interesting episode because normally I have guests have an individual episode first, and then they might be on a kind of like a group episode. But Cody is the opposite in this instance. He was on an episode with Ben Racky. Shout out Ben Racky. And then now he's on for his, finally for his first solo episode. Just a quick intro on Cody before he gives his own. Cody is somebody that I both very much like and dislike. Why do I dislike him? We have all the same interests, but he's better than me at all of them. He's probably better than me at jiu-jitsu. He's bigger and stronger than me. My best designation in the training space is CSCS, which is like the gold standard trainer certification. He has that as like a side quest because he's also a doctor of physical therapy, and he has a mustache that puts all firefighters to shame. So, Cody, you don't mind giving a quick intro? What's your
I wish I still had my handlebars, but that's all right. Dr. Cody Craig, Doctor of Physical Therapy, also a strength and conditioning specialist. I work with a lot of fighters and like strength sport people, and now I work hybrid location wise out of Ben Racky's gym. So all of his athletes and all the other high school and college people when they're in town, and we get to have fun. It's great.
You work with primarily like a lot of volleyball players. I think baseball as well is one of the main sports. I know that you guys have talked about it quite a bit, but one of the main difficulties you struggle with is just the sheer volume that the athletes endure between all the tournaments, practices, and all that stuff. And then strength conditioning. And then also you're the rehab specialist within the facility. How is it that you guys strike such a good balance together between performance and rehab, and then also being able to work together and mitigate all that with the super packed schedules that these athletes have?
Yeah, it is kind of like an interesting thing. Like as a side note, like you and I come from the same generation where there wasn't this backed research and supported data on like load management. It was just every workout was a gut check. And you would think after 20 plus years of progress that that would not be the case, but it is still the case. And these kids are just getting ran into the ground, and then they're expected to play at the top of their game 24/7. And it's just like, we know that's not how that works, right? But Ben and I are trying to do our best, and we're, trying to communicate with the coaches and the athletes and parents the best we can with, load management talks, how this works. Like essentially the coaches are bringing me a job because it's just leading to overuse at the end of the day. So we have those conversations, and then where Ben and I come in, it's like, yes, I do the assessments. And then it's like, hey, I want you to do this, this, and this. If we need to do some manual stuff or soft tissue modalities, 100% can do that. But what's really cool with me and Ben kind of having this like collaboration right off the bat, I have direct access to someone that has control in the weight room. So it's like, okay, for this athlete, hey, let's cut this out in the warm up. Let's make these modifications to the plyos or their main squat pattern, whatever's, it's usually like knees or ankles for the volleyball players, sometimes shoulder, but it's like, let's make these modifications for now for this amount of weeks and move on from there. So then I will reassess every 2 weeks. I don't really see the need to, Ben has eyes on, I'm usually in the gym too, so I will run across them, but it's like, let's do a reassessment at 2 weeks. Great. They're doing this. Let's bump it up here. Let's bump it up there. I give them their, specialty exercises or whatever it's more specific to them, and then rock and roll. And it works flawlessly in my opinion, just because it's like, we have a direct correlation and connection to what we're doing in our controlled environments. So minus, volleyball.
I think the benefit to that too is that you guys both have a very strong understanding of each other's realms. You're not your traditional, like a PT mill sort of physical therapist that doesn't understand training, right? You have done bodybuilding, powerlifting, so you know how to get after it in the gym, not just like the 5-pound dumbbells and the, minibands kind of physical therapist. But then you also still train a sport and jiu-jitsu, which we both train. And, Ben, for example, has a pretty good understanding of, injury mechanisms and, good basic fundamental principles when it comes to, rehabilitation and all that stuff. And so you guys speak each other's language, and I would say are to a good extent capable of doing each other's roles and jobs. You just have your areas of specialty as well.
Sure,
I find that you guys already have the bridge built, whereas it's difficult to have someone who's just like your pure meathead strength coach who doesn't care about any of the injury stuff, and just wants to run people on the ground, who works with the PT mill type, who's like, oh, well, they should just rest, ice compression elevation, get a little bit of massage and a little bit of like,
here's a hot pack. Yeah.
Here's a hot pack or something like that. So I think it's actually a great blend that you guys are almost like I wouldn't say yin and yang because you guys are almost the same thing anyway, right? But it's just a really complementary fit and all that. So I think it really services your athletes well, and I hope that they can understand and appreciate that. And then I would say The same with the parents. I think that's one thing that I actually want to ask you about. Ben talks about it quite a bit, and I've dealt with it too, where parents want what looks like is best when it comes to training. So as a soccer skills trainer, it would be, I don't know if you've ever seen the brand Skills, SKLZ, but it's like the yellow rebounder nets and all that stuff.
I have their ladders. Yeah.
Yeah. So skills. Okay. So like I did a skill session, skill training, where I was at the field on one side with just cones and balls and doing like very simple fundamental work. And then there's a trainer on the other side with the parachute and the ladder and the rebounder and making these kids do all these circuits and all that. I'm like, this is insane, but it looks so official that you're gonna have a parent that pays, well over $100 for a session with somebody that looks very professional versus me with a bag of balls or whatever and some cones.
Yeah.
Just making the kid, develop their touch, their passing, their dribbling, learning the actual techniques, developing their IQ or, replicating the game. And it's hard for a parent to be able to distinguish that. They shouldn't be an expert in everything, right? But the same can be said for performance when you see sports specific drills or rehab, where it's like, oh, let me just attach a band to a tennis racket and make them do a tennis swing or something like that. That's going to be way better than just squatting and benching and stuff like that. So how do you guys navigate? Obviously, you guys navigate with each other well. How do you navigate with a parent?
So what I like about, like, in particular, Ben's gym, because I've been to lots of gyms at this point in my life, and as far as training and tracking metrics, they just haven't been there. But Ben has it. Ben has a vert pad. He has the timing gates. Like, we measure velocity, we measure power, like even just general ground reaction force. So it's, in my mind, really easy when the kid comes in at, they're testing at, end of week 4 and then the end of week 12. And it's like, you see their vert increase by whatever, like even a half an inch is kind of a big deal, but if it goes up even further. And like, it was funny. There's a 8th grader, absolute monster of an athlete volleyball player, but her mom sent a picture at the game, and like she was literally a full head over anybody else jumping for the ball. And it's like, that is crazy to see, but it's when you compare that and show them actual metrics, I think that helps a ton. But just like all things, you can lead a horse to water, and there's going to be some parents that just like, they're looking for, I want to see my kid with a weighted vest jumping, trying to hit a volleyball at the same time. And you're like, I see where you're going. I truly get it. But it's like, we have our metrics. Let's hit the things that attack these metrics. And then hopefully they're getting their practice in at the practice that they're going to 6 days a week and following it up at the game. It's like, my job is not to make you a better volleyball player, it's to make you a better athlete. And this is how we do that, right? So show them the metrics, and they can do what they want with that. And hopefully over time they understand. But I think it's good to see when they have they're like, I need someone more sports specific, and they go see that trainer, and then they get worse, or they get injured, or they stay injured. And it's like, I don't need to say I told you so, but there it is. And now they know. They're like, okay, this system is definitely more in tune with what my kids should be doing. And I think that's all you can do.
Yeah, you hope if the parent comes back that they're more bought in the second time around.
Mm-hmm.
Do you follow Alex Sterner? He's a jiu-jitsu strength coach.
Yep.
So he was a guest on the podcast too, but he posted a clip the other day of one of his female athletes, and she's super strong. She's deadlifting 315. She's doing rows with 115, stuff like that. Really cool stuff. And he at one point just posted a clip kind of making fun of the super secret kind of fascial exercises where she's like doing plate flips while she's riding a skateboard. And like, she's just goofing around. He's like, it's nothing, right? So I just made a comment saying yeah, let's disregard all common sense strength training principles because we now have a secret exercise, which is, plate flips on a skateboard.
On a skateboard, yeah.
But that's essentially you're talking about putting a weighted vest on and then just jumping like crazy. I understand how parents kind of get to this conclusion. I remember, who was the basketball? John Morant had the tire workout. Did you ever hear about that? Where he'd just do box jumps on a tire, 100 box jumps or something like that. And then he'd do, I don't know, this, that, the other step up jumps, hurdle jumps, all seated jumps, every single jump variation. He'd do 1,000 jumps. And then people are like, that's why he jumps as high as he does. I'm like, that's not why he jumps as high as he does. He is the freak athlete that he is despite his training, not due to his training. And if you think I want to be better, I should just jump more. So I find it interesting that with a little bit of understanding of scientific principles, just read one training textbook. I feel like you can just do really simple things and get really great results, but it's commonplace for people to want to try to replicate as much as possible, which led to kind of a good debate that I had with some of, my trainer buddies. So Run Club is Ishan Hiba, Tyler Barretts, and Ben Racky. We're on a group chat together. And there was a guy who had a judo specific workout. And so he was doing really heavy row, very simple strength training. And then at the end, he did the thing where you take bands and you replicate the sleeves. And you just start doing the kind of twisty, pulley stuff. He's trying to replicate some takedowns or some throws. And so I was talking to the guys about that, and it's kind of interesting where if you talk about skills versus, performance, that you almost want it to be divided. Very general stuff in the gym improves your software and your hardware, and then you just apply that in the context of your skill work. It makes you a better athlete. We're all in agreement there. But if we look at the band exercise as skill work, I don't have an issue with it. But if you look at it in the context of performance, I have an issue with it because it's severely underloaded. So that's a question I have for you. Of course, a weighted vest jumping up is going to mess with your actual skill, but like where does the line exist? Because at some points you can just do a skill exercise, and not think of it in that same set. One exercise can just be looked at as a skill versus as a performance. Have you ever considered anything like that? Do you have a line?
Yeah, a really big thing that's like always like kind of come to mind is like greasing the groove.
Mhm.
Like I say that with like, hey, we're tired, we're fatigued, especially like if I use the context of a power lifter, say they squat 450, whatever. It's like, hey, I'm really beat up. You know, my back's a little stiff, knees are a little achy. It's like, okay, let's just have like a grease the groove session, simply for the fact of like, we're still getting squat pattern. We're getting some relative practice, but it's really just, we're just doing the thing for the sake of doing the thing, knowing damn well it's not a performance aspect. It's just strictly the skill. And so they don't lose the motor pattern like quality. And it's like, that's essentially what a taper is as well, as just a severely backed off, deloaded situation, just to make sure that the brain is still having the hardware running through the system and knows not to mess it up next time you go and do it, right? So in the case of jiu-jitsu, I hate when these people use these bands. I forget her name. She's a crazy jiu-jitsu athlete. Like doesn't look like she could kill you, but she could, right? And like she's doing the bands all the time. Yeah, the wave bands, and then it's like turning around and it's like, hey, if you're doing like a little bit of a cool down or you're just doing it for fun, I have no problem with it. In fact, it's probably good to just get some general practice if you only made it to jiu-jitsu, 2 times this week, whatever. But it's not building grip. It's not building back strength. It's just practicing the skill at the end of the day. And it's like, that's like, you and I are not professional jiu-jitsu athletes. So maybe we could benefit from that simply because we're not doing jiu-jitsu 7 days a week. Right? That's totally fine. But these people that are training at this extremely high level, they're getting enough practice. Like you guys don't need to do more of it. You just need to work on other qualities, in my opinion. But
so that's kind of a fun thing to talk about because I think I showed you the variation where you use like towels to do like the skull crushers with like a suspension trainer or a rings or whatever you want to use. You can think about that as like, oh, maybe this is like jiu-jitsu specific or helps with jiu-jitsu. To me, it's just a grip challenge, right? And I can use it with other people that don't train grip enough. But I'd be lying if I said that was nearly as intense as when I have a collar grip and someone's using 2 arms to try to break it. That is a stronger stimulus on my grip than almost anything I can replicate in the gym. And I think people often forget that like the sport itself is such a huge stimulus. And if what you're doing to prepare for the sport is less than the actual sporting demands, it might not actually be that beneficial. Some of the greatest
100%.
athletes of all time would say that their training sessions were harder than their actual competitions. And that's because they're preparing almost like, I wouldn't say over preparing, but just making it so that they're totally ready when it comes time for competition. Like, I'm going to use a soccer analogy. Manchester United used to say that their Wednesday scrimmage against each other was harder than their Saturday game against the other team because they might play a team that's 15th out of 20 in the table, but they're playing against people that are first in the table in their own team, and they're all fighting to start on that weekend game, so they're fighting even harder. So it's just like iron sharpens iron and all that stuff. But going back to that, it's interesting the idea of like doing something specific. Where does specificity come into play as you talk, And I think that the wagon went from overly specific to GPP is king a little bit too much, and that there's still a time and place for specificity. An example is, I think conditioning can reflect sports a little bit more. Not every sport has the same energy demands. I think it could be your kind of prehab work, for lack of better words, or just injury reduction, whatever term you want to use. But if there's a specific site that gets injured more, maybe groin for soccer, maybe neck or and grip jiu-jitsu, for example, you can focus on that if it's the volume, whatever. But as far as specificity, I think in the rehab setting, you actually need to think through that lens quite a bit more than maybe performance. An example is when you have me doing the adductor kicks. For anybody who doesn't know, Cody is my physical therapist for my groin rehab. I've pulled it 6 times. We'll get into that. And I got tired of trying to figure it out myself. So I thought I'd, refer out to a very qualified professional. But that's a pretty specific exercise to basically do a soccer kick with a cable attached to the foot. And we might see that like the gi grip thing is dumb, but then the soccer thing is smart. Where does that come into play? Specificity for injury.
Yeah. So talking about, how the wagon is shifted, or I use like the pendulum analogy. You and I both know like PT or like chiro or massage might go super zoomed in on a specific tissue when yes, they might need that, but then we miss the other side of the equation as far as developing the athlete or bringing it all together with more specific athletes that like, hey, this is it, and they're doing everything else already. That's what I love, because then it's like my job's taken care of. I can really focus in on these other specific qualities instead of trying to push this other metric. So I tell people, you still try to do like your general, like here's your movement prep, here's some explosive work, here's some of your strength work, here's some of like your accessory work in like a typical session. And it's like, okay, maybe we need to dose in, whether it's a micro dose of whatever XYZ exercise, or that's your accessory that you're doing for your said injury. So it's like, you can either do it at the end, or if it does help you prep for a more heavy compound movement, something like that, you can 100% throw it in the beginning as your movement prep. Like specificity gives you a constraint that is going to tell you how to do your programming or your resistance training or your practice, like at the end of the day. So there's a book called The Gift of Injury. I highly recommend it if anyone's like, I come from a very like chronic pain situation, but it basically demands specific things of your life. But I look at it, when you switch the frame, it's like it's giving you guide rails, like it's the bumpers at the bowling alley. It is a sign and signal, and it's a cheat code once you can see it. And that's the problem, is so many people just see pain, they don't see the signal that it's specifically giving, and that just tells you where to go, in my opinion. But I don't know if that answers that
I think
question.
it does. Yeah, because it's like if your issue was chronic back pain, and mine is repeated like groin pulls. So you don't need to do the exact same program as me, because maybe your groin has never been pulled. So you don't have to work on that. And maybe I've never had low back pain, so I don't have to work on that. So specificity, again, I always like to say that specific is actually incredibly important, but in the context of the individual and not the actual task. So if I'm a soccer player, I don't need to attach a band around my neck and do like the neck rotations all the time, which I've seen people do as if they're doing like headers. Not that it's a bad thing to do, but it's like, what do I as an individual need? Because you might have two soccer players on the same team, and one is, really tall and strong, but he's maybe very slow, and the other guy's really little and quick, but he's really weak. And it's like, okay, even just from a strength conditioning perspective, you probably should tackle their programming a little bit differently, or emphasize different areas, maintain here, develop there, right? But as far as injury, it's the same thing. And one of the things that I really learned from, in fact, I thought I had a very strong groin going into it. I said I was doing like plyometric Copenhagen, which kind of bananas. But there's always like the one thing that was like would make it pull, and I can never find out what it was. And you were kind of like for lack of better words, like a detective for, I think the term you use is itching the scab, scratching the scab. But it's like, what is the thing that makes you feel like you're going to get injured again? And it's like, okay, we're going to lean into this about as much as you can tolerate before you actually do re-injure yourself. And I find that that's actually like, if we're talking specificity, that's a really good way to almost hunt for the injury mechanism and then build a resiliency to it. So I'm curious, where did that idea come from?
Yeah, again, it comes from like the rehab background on people just in a mill style. I say mill, think of like your general large PT corporations. I call them nail tech salons, just because it's like, this is their sheet or their paper, and they're just trying to strike all these boxes to get a number in to submit to insurance, because that's at the end of the day who's going to pay them. And it's like, well, they just got to get all that down, and it's so zoomed into just a general broadsheet, and it doesn't look at anything of the athlete. And it's like, what made the difference between, again, and I actually credit my wife early on in my career when we were just dating, because she kind of stopped me in my tracks one day. She's like, well, your problem is squatting. It's not your glutes, but like your glutes could be still very well involved, right? That's not we know this, but it's like, what can you do to the squat itself? Because that was my problem. And it was like, stop looking at it as like a sheet, or like, hey, all soccer players need to have this. It's like, well, what is the individual struggling with? And then you can go 1, 2, 3 degrees away. So especially like me, chronic back pain, like I wouldn't say I'm like a chronic back pain patient anymore, but it's like, I definitely spent 5+ years afraid of my back. And it's like, well, what was it that did it? I had to get really good at squatting. Squatting was especially like low bar specific stuff that would, anytime I would get to 405 or above, it would wreck me. And it's like, what can I do to still do the thing, still try to touch base with my own pain? But then that gives me my baseline, right? So I guess you could say I just got it from my own experience, and especially developing it into, I get, again, a lot of other people that have developed chronic low back pain from powerlifting or whatever sport is come to. And it's like, well, what's the thing? And that's simply, I think, the greatest question I could ever ask anybody. That's better than any special test. That's better than any imaging that you can get. For the most part, there's other signs and symptoms to know. But yeah, my own experience has definitely enlightened my own thought processing. So
It's definitely something I want to go down, is talking about how you're able to work with people mobily. But real quick, is your wife in this field, or is she working a completely different field?
So she actually used to be a PT as well.
Okay.
Now she's in medical research. I tell people she's kind of like the pre-FDA, prior to like companies sending their research out to the FDA, because the last thing you want is to not get your drug or your equipment. Yeah. So that's what she does now.
So the reason why I asked is, I was going to say, like, does she have understanding of the field, and then the suggestion she made is because she has the understanding, or is it sometimes like you have to be outside of the field to make something that seems obvious from the outside, but it's when you're inside, it's too difficult to see that solution?
That point in time, like, we were still students, and I was coming from a heavy like strength and conditioning situation, and she wasn't. And I think that analogy still applies. Like, she technically had an outside viewpoint, and that probably helped. Yeah.
Which is why, like, I recommend to people, whether you're a coach, you should get a coach sometimes, just so you can get a different perspective, because maybe you're so in your head, or like a mailman has a mailman, a therapist has a therapist. We're going to say, like, sometimes it's good to actually have somebody else who can do the thing that you can do, but differently, or see something that you're missing, because it's just hard to do it on. And then it's almost like a pride thing. That's why, like, for the first 6 pulls or 5 pulls, I was like, I should be able to do this on my own. If I'm going to sell to people that I can help you with your health and wellness and all that stuff, that means I should never have any injury issues myself, or I should be able to solve it, And when you don't, it's like, okay, well, I'm tired of this. I'm, willing to learn from somebody else. And that's an opportunity to just continue growing as a professional, because I've been able to learn different exercises, different concepts, and different strategies and all that. So I think that's a cool thing. You can go down this rabbit hole as well. I do want to get back to the mobile thing in a second, but I definitely broke your heart the other day when I didn't know who it was. Boris Chico is how you say his name?
Yeah, Boris Chico, yeah.
So it's like, again, that's how we have like different backgrounds is, I tend to think of, I guess, powerlifting and bodybuilding. It's like lifting is the main thing, right? But for me, lifting was never the main thing. It was always just a tool for other sports, whether it's combat sports or soccer or something like that. So that's why I say I'm a meathead affiliate, is because I enjoy the weight room only so much as a vehicle to help me improve in the other areas. If I could never play sports and only lift weights, I feel like it might get a little bit mundane for me. But when I think that, like, if I'm doing someone up off the ground in jiu-jitsu, like, you're actually trying to, maybe they're in like a spider lasso guard or something, or whatever, you're just trying to flip them or
rip them out.
Then all of a sudden it feels like it has more value to me, So I was going to ask you about your influence and how that's affected both of you as trained CSCS, DBT, whatever, from your powerlifting and your bodybuilding side. And of course, I know you're a big conjugate fan. So can you just speak about those influences?
So like my undergrad, I had like Cal Dietz actually was a graduate of my undergrad. And so heavily influenced the NSCA, which I think our program was very well equipped with a lot of that aspects, just because we were one of the first programs to put out kind of a monster in the field. And then there was a short time frame, Dave Tate was involved. So if you don't know who Dave Tate is, elite FTS, he was also at Westside back in his golden days. I think just having these, like, technically, Cal Dietz and like the conjugate system are definitely on different planes, but they lead into each other in some aspects. And just kind of going through that versus the standardized like stuff that you got to read in the textbook or whatever. It's like, okay, here's the zoomed out lens, because it forces you to come back out, but then you see where they all connect and where are these stronger principles coming from. But like for me, it's like I got super crazy into powerlifting because I loved to squat. I was like getting really strong at it. I remember at one point I was like 165, 70 pounds, and I was doing sets of 315 on squat for like 12 to 15 reps. I was just going insane. I look at that now and I'm like, why would I ever do that? Like, that's just silly. But honestly, I don't know if I could do that now. I'm definitely stronger now, but not in that capacity.
Yeah.
But it's like, I was at this point in time, you and I have both been training for a long time, and there's probably very few programs or aspects of programs that we haven't not done. And so, I've ran all the powerlifting programs, 5-3-1, all the conjugate systems, starting strength, and then you go to strong first. And then it's like, now you discover periodization, and now you're doing undulate. Yeah. It's like you go down that rabbit hole and you start to piece out like, hey, this is the stuff that works, and this is where these guys are trying to go. And it's, it's kind of like a jaded like implication now, because it's like I can't look at like someone's new program. They say this is the greatest thing ever, and I'm like, I guarantee you, I've seen all that, and we can take apart the principles, and it's just like every other program, right? Unless it's like a super like specific situation. I'm going into the deep end a little bit. I've spent the last year not reading any strength and conditioning or rehab texts. Like, yeah, I'll read my, like the studies that come through on my laptop like when they come through like once a week or something like that. But I've spent more time reading fiction books this last year than probably any other time in my life. And it's funny, I say, because it's like the parts of the books that hit, like they teach lesson through story. And it's like, I can see these literally in the science of what I do. And I've gotten kind of separated from being so specific on numbers to the concepts now. And it's like, I can see where all these realms come through just from reading. I'm reading a D&D book from 1980 right now. And it's like, they have the same themes. It's just putting it in a different context or a point of view. And I think that helps. I think it's helped me develop the conceptualization and being able to direct it in more specific manners. Granted, I'm definitely due to get back into like a science text for sure, just because I've gotten so far off the deep end. Again, the pendulum swings, and that's a good thing sometimes because you get what you need from the extremes occasionally. But yeah, I think being a nerd helps in its own matter, like, because you can take what you want and learn it in a more fun way. So
yeah. It's interesting to say that because I've been having this conversation quite a bit recently. But when I first started, I don't know if you know who Paul Favorites is, PJF Performance. He's the, so he's a basketball performance coach, but he'd also do some skills training. And when I was a college soccer player, I wanted to play professionally. It didn't happen. Then I wanted to be a coach. And I didn't like coaching. I liked coaching high school, but coaching club, like youth sports culture, just was not for me. Big issue. And I've done that rant a few times, so I don't want to do it again. But but then I was like, okay, well, I'll do skills coaching, I'll learn strength conditioning, and I'll go niche, and I'll be, the soccer version of Paul Favorites, where I can offer both. And I kind of do that now, which I think is kind of funny. But that was my original goal, was to do only that. And then I was like, well, the kids I'm going to work with, I'm probably going to start with like middle school, high school athletes. And then maybe I can work my way up college and semi-pro professional, whatever, right? But if I'm training youth athletes, then I have to train them before school or after school. I'm not going to have anyone during the day. So I thought during the day, I should learn some, just general personal training so I could work with, parents or something like that, right? But then that's how my business became very personal trainery as opposed to performance training, just organically developed into much more general. And as I started to work with different populations, different goals, different abilities, I started to see, there's actually a lot of like joy to be found in helping somebody who just really small, like almost like stupid things, but they're not actually stupid. Someone said I was able to put my socks and shoes on without sitting down or leaning against something, both of them, and like a balance test. And it's like, I hadn't done that in 10, 20 years or something like that. And it's like, wow, it helps someone regain an ability for life, improve their quality of life, be happier and more confident, be better for their family. And it's like, that's a really profound thing. And maybe that's more meaningful than teaching someone to kick a ball a little bit better so that they can score like a game winning goal, whatever. So they all bring joy to me. But I learned too from kind of generalizing that I think it's almost first of all, people say go niche from a business perspective because you can't write one program that appeals to everybody or that works for everybody. So if you just go super niche, then you get your die-hard followers, and then you don't need a big following. You'll just make a lot of money off the small following, whatever. And then word of mouth in the community, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. But I think you should start off general so you can understand, where do I really want to go niche if you want to go niche. But I also think that my niche now or my specialty now is connecting the dots.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about 100%. Reading fiction and then seeing how it connects to Burko Shanksy or something like that, who would have thought that D&D and those things would ever connect? But like, if you actually like just open your mind and try to experience as much as possible, you'll see that there's only so many thoughts that humans throughout all of history have had. There's only so many original thoughts, original ideas, themes, so it's like, I actually like trying to see similarities and differences. I like to see how we're similar more than we're different sometimes is a fun experiment to do. But then also, where do these differences come from? How different are they really? What was the thought process or the context behind it? So I don't know, it might be just like a weird thing, but if someone asks like, what is your specialty? I'd almost say generalization is my specialty because I don't know, there's something fun about it. And then as we're talking about like training is cyclical, you'll see a new program that is a shocking new method or something like that. And then, so I'll give credit to Matt Watson, for example. Plyometrics over the past 3 to 5 years, I think have been seen totally differently. Before it was just, what's your highest box jump and broad jump? And then people are like, cool, I did my plyos, and maybe track athletes would do a little bit more in that sense, of course. But Matt Watson did really well with creating the light tier, the deep tier, the medium tier, and the ping tier. It's basically like, do really soft jumps, medium jumps, hard jumps, and then you can jump really low to the ground. And that's more for like mobility is what he says. But he's really good at giving credit to all the influences he's had throughout his track and field career. And then also, like, he's shown clips before of Russian goalkeepers from the 60s doing deep tier plyos, you know? So it's
Yeah.
like, these aren't actually totally new ideas. They're just kind of cyclical. So that's also why I think studying history and different cultures is important. I know, again, rabbit hole, but if you think that your country is the only country that's ever had a good idea or been on the right side of history, that's crazy. And if you think
Yeah.
your time is the only time that's ever had any intelligence, that's crazy. They had plumbing in Rome. Didn't
Yeah.
mean like ancient Rome. So like they must have known something, you know?
They had stuff thousands of years ago that like, I mean, who was it before the Greeks that like discovered like hygiene was a necessary thing to
Yeah.
not get sick? And
Yeah.
it's like, that was thousands of years ago. But everything you were saying, this quote came to mind. Oh my gosh, Mike Tersher, again, in the powerlifting realm, I was watching a video and he said, if you want to learn something new, read an old book. And
No.
I was like, wow, that's kind of crazy. And sure enough, I picked up his old RTS training manual from like when he first got into like trying to conceptualize his own training. And it was like, I bought that and it was just like, that's crazy. Like I'm learning all these like these new things and turn around 5 years later. Now it's like a trend, right? Like all this stuff comes back around, but it's because people hopefully are going back and getting the concepts out of the old stuff. Because it's all, like you said, it's all been done before. Nothing's new.
Sure.
Range of Strength talked about it with like his textbooks. Like nothing has been new. It's just been getting shifted and coming in trends. And it's like, yeah, here we go.
I'm glad you mentioned range of strength too, because I think he's such a fascinating individual that he does gymnastics, flexibility, odd man, sort of like lifts or like, odd object lifts and stuff like that. And then he does powerlifting as well. And he has like the classic bodybuilding inspiration. So I'm like, man, he just does a little bit of everything, you know? And I think that the cool thing about that too is we can go in a couple of different directions with this. One is you don't have to specialize. Like so many people attach their identity to the one sport that they do, and they can do multiple sports or multiple different training modalities. And it's like, just because I'm not going to pick on one in particular, I'm just going to say CrossFit because it's CrossFit. Whatever. But CrossFit, it's like just because CrossFit doesn't mean CrossFit is the only way to train. It's the best way to train. Everybody else who trains anything else is dumb. And vice versa. If it's high rocks, if it's bodybuilding, it's cool. To me, it's just, it's a tool. I like to say, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? But what if you have a screwdriver or if you have a saw, right? You're not going to try to hammer a 2x4 in half, right? Like, that'd be kind of stupid. So it's good, like learning from all these different things. What you said is interesting too, that quote, because it reminds me of basically an identical quote, which is you'll never read the same book twice because you're a different person the second time around and you have a different perspective. So I like all that. But then going back to range of strength too, we talk about like hybrid athletes. It's this new buzzword, right? But people have done hybrid stuff forever. In fact, I think decathletes are the original hybrid athlete, or at least one of the original hybrid athletes, because they might be top 1%, at least at the Olympics, top 1% in 10 different events in the entire world. They might not be good enough in any single one to win the damn thing, you know, but these guys can throw and they can jump and they can run middle distance and they can sprint and all these crazy feats. And then you have CrossFitters, again, a good example that you can have competing demands. You can be really strong, really fit, and you can also do gymnastics type skills and like that. So I think that's a cool thing, but range of strength is another example. So I like to think of people as like video game characters where you can upgrade any stat if you just put in the work towards it. So you've heard my voice. I have a monotone. It sounds terrible, but you know, I could just like say, oh, because I have a monotone, I should never sing. But I bet if I took singing lessons and I practiced, it could get better like anything else. So I just like using that theory when it comes to anybody, when it comes to training, for example. It's like, oh, I've never been very good at this. I'm like, what a great time to get good at it then, you know?
You know exactly what you're lacking. That's an easy way to bring up your bottom floor, you know? Yeah.
And even with like high level athletes, I know you worked with a lot of NFL players earlier on. There's a certain point where you don't have to develop their strengths anymore. You just have to maintain it. If they can squat 500, you know, it's like, all right, do we have to go to 505 if it's going to potentially risk your like a low back injury before you have like a big game or something like that? Or what is the lowest hanging fruit? What is the thing that you're actually lacking that may be holding you back? Maybe your strength you just maintain. One of my clients, actually, I told him I like to think of like the main 4 buckets as like mobility, speed and power, strength, and like conditioning, right? Of course, there's like all the little variations within those things, but that's just a simple way to kind of bucket like the session structure. And I said, you're basically capped out on strength. He has a Smith machine that goes up to 300 pounds. He's maxed out, you know, the deadlift, bench, and squat on that, right? He's maxed out his Bowflex 90-pound dumbbells on all sorts of different lifts. He's doing all these. And I'm like, all right, well, you're maxing out the equipment that you have in your home. And I'm like, your strength is good. We got to work on being able to touch your toes and going for a jog, you know? So like I said, we used to do maybe 45, 50 minutes out of the hour strength. It's like now we might just do 30-minute strength, maintain, do a couple hard sets, and then spend a lot of time doing some conditioning together, focusing a little bit more on mobility. But I mean, that's the thing now that's going to make him feel better in life because the strength isn't a limiting factor anymore. It's not an issue. So the same thing with performance, not just health, but also performance.
It's I think like Lucas Hardy range of strength, I think him starting the side quest mentality is nothing but beneficial, and I hope it takes more traction because it's like, what do we know? We can take youth sport. Athletes that just do one sport year round are more prone to injury, burnout, and worsening of performance at the end of the day. But it's like when they have truly time to be a kid, truly time to work on stuff for swimming, and truly time to work on stuff for basketball, soccer, whatever, they're going to go a lot farther with their bodies, their minds, general performance than anybody else. And it's like, as adults, people get stuck. I think like, I need to be a power lifter. That was my problem. I was like, I have to be a low bar squatter. And that was the one thing that was like terrible. I don't want to say terrible for me. It was my weak point because it was so strong and so overdeveloped, and I didn't have any other qualities, right? From a different aspect. And it's like, if you just realize, like, people are so afraid to lose muscle mass or lose speed or lose their power. And it's like, you really don't need much to maintain what you've worked so hard for already. Just do the maintenance, and then let's spend some more resource developing those other qualities. Like, I want to bring up CrossFit or High Rocks, and you see these guys that are jacked, and they're like, well, if these guys can do these like cardio events and they still look that jacked. No, they did like a decade plus of heavy strength resistance training to develop their physique. Now they're in a sport where they can maintain their muscle mass, and they're working on these other qualities. Like, it's not that sport gave that to them. They just have a prior history, and good genetics, probably a little bit is involved there. And they move forward and they keep what they have. So it's like side questing after you've developed as an adult, I think, is like the ultimate cheat code to continue moving forward. Like me and Ben starting to like collaborate and become friends, like, is definitely shifted my training qualities, just because now I'm exposed to like what he's doing a little bit more. And it's like, oh, it's inspired me. Yeah, let's get back into doing some plyometrics. Let's get back into some power, expression of whatever you have. And it's like, yeah, why not? Because I know I'm good. Like, I'm not going to lose out on my muscle mass that I'm so worried about, and going down that rabbit hole.
The thing too is that, like, you're not just going to go from one day having all this muscle to the next day it's all gone. You might start to notice the gradual shift, and you can always go back. I had actually the opposite situation. My first ever client, she told me that like she has nice shoulders, she wants to work on them, and like working on arms and all that stuff. And then it's the same thing though, where it's like, I don't want to get too bulky. And so, okay, well, if you start to get too bulky, let me know. We'll change the programming and all that stuff. She's the only client that ever actually started to get too bulky. Again, good genes and all that stuff. But she said she has like these like cute tops, and she said she was like almost like splitting the seams on her sleeves and all that stuff.
Hell yeah, I love that.
Which I think is awesome. I was like, man, I wish I knew what that was like. But so, yeah, I just had this fun. But I also think it's interesting too. You talked about the really jacked High Rocks guys. Yeah, it's not the burpee broad jumps that made them so jacked, you know what I mean? Or like the med ball or the wall ball, right? That made them super jacked. It's probably having done powerlifting or bodybuilding or something like that for 10 years and then you switch into another field. See people trying to just, like a 13-year-old who's just hitting puberty, trying to copy LeBron James' 40-year-old workout. You know, you just like, and like, I was that 13-year-old, not LeBron James, but like maybe I saw Ronaldo at, I don't know, 30 something doing some exercise. I'm like, oh, if it works for Ronaldo, it's got to work for me. That's the most. And everybody goes through that trap. I think it's just a part of like growing up, but you don't realize that it's like, okay, well, at that age, he probably wasn't like when he was 13. I'm 13 at that time. It's like when he was 13, he's probably doing something totally different than what he's doing when he's 30. But also, like, people, like I've said before, can be great despite what they do not do to what they do. I like to tell people with like genetic potential that it sets the floor and the ceiling, but training determines where you are within the floor and ceiling. But there's always that one guy where ceiling might be lower than somebody else's floor. And I think of Usain Bolt. I think I could have had the best training, like track training ever, the most deliberate, consistent, intelligent programming forever, my entire life. And he could have just run a little bit and he still would have been faster than me. And like, that's something that some people don't understand is that like, if you also want to get into like what sport a person should play, sometimes I think people fall into the sport because that's what they are good at. That like, what's a basketball player and a basketball player doesn't, you know what I mean? But then also I think, I don't know, I feel like people are almost like dogs in that sense, like a dog breed. Like you like the things that you're good at. So like a dachshund digs because it's built for digging, and then like a greyhound runs because you don't see greyhounds digging as much and dachshunds running as much in that sense.
Certainly not dachshunds running as much.
Well, yeah. But I think that like people are kind of similar in that sense. And then as far as genetic potential, it's the same concept. Having said all that, going kind of back to what I was saying is that you shouldn't just copy what you see someone else doing because they're built completely differently to you. And even if they're doing it, doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. Do you know what I mean? You just have to look at where you're at, what you need to do to improve, and just focus on that. And if you don't know, then you should hire a professional if you have the opportunity or the ability.
100%. Pat
Mhm.
Davidson had a comment on a post. Someone was saying like they train people based on their muscle fiber type specifically, and then their sternal angle. Those are the two major factors. And the guy that literally like wrote the book on movement patterns and like muscle fiber type changes. I don't want to say he wrote the book, but it's involved in his main book that he wrote. And it's like, he literally said, find the metrics that are going to push their performance and train the exercises that are going to push those metrics. It's not that hard. Training in these other contexts are not going to provide the stimulus that they need, and it's not going to make them better athletes. And I was like, done. That's all you need to say. Like, perfect.
It's the beauty of being able to simplify, though. I think that's like the real credit of a good coach is that it's so easy to get into the weeds and people start talking about this variation over that variation, this, method over another. Ben was talking to us in the run club group about, there was a post he saw where they're talking about isometrics and they started talking about like omni isometrics, which I'd never heard of before. And like, man, if you just started getting into the isometric rabbit hole, it would seem like the most complicated thing in the world. It's like, okay, but how is this actually going to serve a client? How are you going to write a program for a client based off of this? If you just like start freaking out over this one new specific technique that you learned about and everybody should do this now and blah, 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 it's kind of dangerous, right? And a good example is there's two coaches, I'm not going to name names, that I used to follow. I used to think they put out some good content. And then they got into this huge public like Instagram beef with each other because they were arguing over like squat mechanics, like at what point, what joint angle does IR happen and all that stuff. And they got personal. They're like, you do drugs. And it's like, I hate your family. It got so personal. And I just thought it's like, nobody cares. In fact, most coaches and trainers don't even care. Why would a client care? Why would, if you guys have 99% the exact same program, right? And you agree on most principles, and this guy teaches squat a little bit different, but both your clients squat pain-free, good range, great strength, great numbers on it. Who cares? So I like when you just say that really simplistic thing. It's like, what drives performance? What metrics drives like performance, and how do you develop those metrics or whatever, improve those metrics? It's a really simple thing to think of. It's just what I need to get better and what works best for me to get better at that thing. Very simple. And if you can do that for your clients, you can do that for yourself even. I think it's liberating almost to be simplistic as opposed to, man, now I got to reread every single book before I write every single program, That's
Right.
challenging.
Goes back to that discipline equals freedom quote from, it's Jocko, but it's technically Aristotle, but it's like, you're giving yourself constraints so you can do more. Like it's like technically discipline is restrictive, which is funny because now it's like, oh, well, now it actually allows you to do what your goal is set to do, right? So
that's actually, I like that you said constraints because that was one of the most valuable tools I learned as a skills trainer, as a personal trainer, strength coach, whatever title you want to throw at me, was the constraint-led approach instead of trying to tell somebody to do something differently. So I always hated in soccer a really complicated drill. I'd rather have a very simple drill and then just have like one constraint that forces someone to see something in a different way. You might find interesting. I saw recently was a striking gym, so a kickboxing gym, and they had people fighting from their knees. And the idea was that you can't retreat as well. So you have to learn to actually like slip your punches or block better because you can't run away. It's almost like when you see in Mexico, it's very common for the boxers to both put their feet in a tire and you can't like have one foot loose so that you're doing the dirty boxing, you're in tight. But the other thing too is the hip mobility required to throw a kick when you're on your knees is significantly greater than when you're on your feet. You just automatically have this constraint. So I just think like, you said people do bear crawls and if their butt was wiggling around, you put like a foam block on their back and say, don't let it fall. Automatically they get feedback. I kind of like doing stuff like that. But even in like a jiu-jitsu context, you could play pass or sweep, or you can do the ecological approach where instead of doing drills, you just say, okay, we're going to start from a back take position. The person who's defending just has to escape and the other person just has to hold for as much as possible in the round. And you learn a lot from that as opposed to just, I like drilling and I like ecological. There's value to both, but it's like, you can learn a lot just from saying, here's the game, here's the constraint, figure it out.
Yep.
So.
Well, it's the same, like it goes down to the research. Like, how do you, like, it's the four boxes of like constraint. It's like, you have to start with the most simplest and direct and a repeatable process, because if there's too much chaos and they don't understand. And then it's like, then you slowly start adding in different, like one at a time, here's a new chaos variable. But if it's all chaos, they're not going to learn. Like
Yeah.
the brain can't organize on no patterns because we're essentially our own learning language model on the inside. But it's science. It's science down. It's when science meets the art, and then that's what you get is people fighting from their knees, and it looks silly, but it works. You know.
Well, then, okay. So another thing which is interesting is constraints isn't even necessarily doing different things; it's doing the same thing from a different perspective. This can get a little philosophical, and I don't have to bring a theological perspective in. That's outside of the scope of this. But let's talk about from a view perspective. If people look at training and they say this is what you should do, this is what you should do, they might do the exact same thing, but be looking at it from a different angle. So you might think of somebody say like you have to do velocity or power work, and somebody else says no, you have to do dynamic effort. And it's like, is it really that different? Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I see some people saying like if you gotta improve your power, you have to improve your velocity, you have to improve your force production capabilities. And then power is kind of like the byproduct of those two. Cool. So if you do a max effort day and a dynamic effort day, there you go. If you say, oh, well, I don't like conjugate, so I'm just going to lift really heavy and do my sprints and plyos and maybe do some clean somewhere in the middle. But guess what? We're at the same point, achieving the same goal of improving power, just based off that very simple concept of, force and velocity.
Yep. There's many roads, lead to Rome, like all that stuff. And it's, I had this thought like a month ago, and now it's like a social media trend, but neuroticism is 100% the easiest way to get too in the weeds and not make progress in your goals, or putting neuroticism on somebody else. And so like the thing with the bananas versus the blueberries and the polyethanols or whatever is, I'm not even entertaining that. I don't want them to get the views, but it's like, there's so many other good things involved with just like, at the end of the day, the guy that's like the fool wins, or the fool is the one that's happy. He's not getting into the weeds. He's just going and doing what he's doing. And then where professionals like us come in, it's like, okay, is XYZ actually improving this metric? That's the only step that you really need to take, and then change from there. And like you said, force equals mass times acceleration. So that's how we're going to improve that power dynamic. And it's just however fits that athlete in the easiest way possible for them. And it's just like, stop getting so hyper focused on things. It's crazy.
So I used to be the kind of guy that's like, well, I need to do all the research first because I need the best answer. And then when I have the best answer, then I can get best effort and then I'll get results. But it's like, man, if you give best effort and you don't have best answer, but you don't like have that delay, you don't have that buffer of like research and all that stuff, you're going to get a lot done. And it took me I had like this, I used to call myself a perfectionist and wear it like a badge of honor. Oh, I care more than you do. It's like, I'm actually less productive than you because I'm not you specifically, but like another person. It's like, you might just be doing stuff. You might be productive. Meanwhile, I'm researching, I'm not acting enough. And so I like to say that knowledge isn't power. Knowledge without application isn't knowledge. To know and not to do is not to know. So it only matters if you can actually apply the knowledge. Otherwise, it's there, but it's not actionable. It's not valuable, right? So I like to tell people that, like 80% done consistently, done best effort is going to yield better results than optimal, right? That like for whatever reason you can't do or anything like that. And I also tell people too, add when you can't, subtract when you need, because there's so many people that think if I don't do the perfect thing, it's not worth doing at all. And it's like, no, do the best that you can. Like, exactly. Yeah. Like if you got 10 minutes to work out and you just do an EMOM for deadlifts or something like that, right?
10 minutes will beat 0 minutes every day of the week. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But that's your quote. Like, again, I like threes. Education without application is just entertainment.
Yeah. I like that.
At the end of the day. And it's like, it's not doing anything for you minus, if that's what you like to do for fun. There's nothing wrong with that. But if the goal is to get better at something, well, you're not doing it, Well,
I also don't like when people like oversell exercises too. There's like a dive bomber push-up or something like that somebody posted the other day, and one of my clients shared with me. He's like, is this a good exercise? And the guy's like, Mike Tyson developed his punching power from this one exercise. I'm like, no.
Mike Tyson is Mike Tyson. That's at the end of the day.
Yeah, and I bet you the boxing had a lot more to do with the push-up, like with the punching power. All the reps on the heavy bag, all the sparring, I bet had way more to do than the push-up variation. And then they were saying this one variation engages every muscle of the body. And it's kind of an inappropriate joke. But I was like, so does a hard shit, but it doesn't mean that it's going to make you a better athlete, So
right.
I don't know.
Bear down.
Okay, so are you cool with doing a couple quick segments? I just have a couple. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
Is there any major thing that you'd like change your mind on in your career? Anything that stands to mind, like comes to mind?
Yeah, in my particular career, the premise of manual therapy or all the soft tissue modalities, like, I started out very heavy in that realm. Like, as far as like, I was like, I got magic hands. And then I was like, no, no, I don't. There's no magic in them. It's just in the exercise. And it's like, I kept going on these pendulums, and it's like, there's a time and place. Like, truly, like, as long as the other implications are in matter, it's like a little bit of manual therapy with the right narrative it's not gonna harm a patient, and it can be the extra 5% that they need to get over that hump. I'm
Mhm.
totally cool with like a little bit of stuff. It's the narratives I have a problem with, but that's probably been the biggest change in the last 3 years.
Well, so that's actually, I'm glad you said that because I wanted to talk about the like online physical therapy model. You can't do that with people, across states and all that. And yet you can still provide good physical therapy without doing any table tests, without doing any massage, without any of that kind of stuff. You can still help somebody rehab a groin by just programming, the right exercise at the right dose. I think the thing that provides the most value, and maybe it's just the conversations we have back and forth. And then like when you send a loom, it's really, I think it's the conversation that's the most valuable part of that, not necessarily a single specific exercise or program or something like that. It's just, I don't know, your investigation through conversation and then your education through the looms, which if somebody doesn't know what a loom is, it's just a video recording that Cody sends, to review the workouts and all that stuff. That's how he coaches. Because again, with online, you can't even do like one-to-one training where I watch all my clients for every set, every rep, and I can like in the moment tweak something, right?
Uh-huh.
If I do an exercise wrong, for example, I have to say this felt funny and then wait until you respond, say, how does it feel funny? We have a conversation. So it's still effective though, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It may not be optimal and yet it's still effective. And that's why, again, I think optimal is kind of a dumb thing to focus on, because if I waited for like this optimal situation, then maybe I didn't rehab my groin, but I reach out to you, have a suboptimal, but still totally fantastic and, effective way of rehabbing. So I'm curious if you can speak to that real quick, the online physical therapy model and how you can't do those things you were talking about.
Yeah, we've done studies on this. The online model has actually been more productive than the standard mill PT. Now, I can't speak on online versus a hybrid situation.
Mhm.
We haven't gotten that far yet, but it's the same idea. Like, my evaluation was based on what is your scab, what's going to poke that scab. I can do that online, and it's like, yes, if I see something like I had a jujitsu girl who I was like, I suspected an ACL. I can't get my hands on an ACL to do a Lockman's test because she's in Alaska. And so I was like, 100% go see a professional. That is where my job becomes like, okay, do I need a triage, or
Mhm.
can this be something I can do? But those who have been with me long enough, I kind of pride myself on this. If I'm 99% sure I said this to you when we got on our like initial call. My goal at the end of the day is for you to learn, and I want to learn as well. And it's like, education is so important to me. So I want to impart that on somebody. And it's like, okay, if you can learn how to navigate an injury in the moment or like a tweak in the moment, that is the goal. It's to learn how to roll with the punches. And I have people now, they're like, yeah, I was doing this and I tweaked my knee, so I just stepped a little bit wider and put some reverse bands on and I was fine. I'm like that makes me feel proud, because it's like they know how to operate it without me having to be there in person. And that's the goal, is to have, and this is where I think like good trainers, good coaches can really be involved in the situation, is giving movement options when those things occur. And if an athlete can do that on their own, mic drop. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's my shtick as to why it's like, I still think it's extremely powerful as a administration of services, if you will.
Yeah, I think the best testimonial either of us can ever receive is that someone never needs to work with us ever again.
Uh-huh.
Um, that they've learned, they figured out they can do it themselves. And my business is called Empower Performance. That's the whole idea. Is I don't want people to enjoy exercise enough they do it on their own. They don't need me to motivate them. If they were to create a workout on their own, that they understand the general principles, that they're not doing some crazy stuff. That they're like, okay, well, I should do something for power, squat, a hinge, a push, pull, maybe something for core, maybe something for cardio. You know, 3 sets of XYZ is plenty, and then just go for like a good intensity, whatever. It's like, cool. Yeah, I agree with that. That's pretty good. And,
Yep.
it's a really cool thing. I was going to ask as well. So it's kind of like rant and rave, but what is a positive thing that you're noticing in this space? It could be combat sports, it could be training, physical therapy, whatever. Is there something positive that you've noticed that is making you happy recently?
Yeah. I think this is the benefit of social media. The one of few is that strength and conditioning professionals are starting to show the benefits that athletes can have. And so
Mhm.
fighters have been afraid to strength train since the conception of it all. And it's like, no, it's not going to make you slower. It's not going to make you stiffer when done appropriately. People are starting to understand, again, in our gym volleyball, like, let's squat heavy. Let's move fast in the gym. So I'm really excited. Like, I see strength and conditioning getting a highlight as to what it can positively like benefit people out of every context outside of powerlifting or just getting better at squatting with a barbell, you know? So
Side, is there any, like, let's say more the rant side, is there any one thing that's really still driving you crazy besides AI dudes doing weird hip motions?
that for sure. The big thing is like people hop on these trends and they think it's the next greatest thing, you know, after, I don't even know the quote, pizza, whatever it is. Like right now, it's like isometrics had like they're having a huge highlight and people are thinking that's the key. And it's like, we'll give it a year. And now we're going to go back to, what's his name? The high intensity, full range of motion. Yeah, Mike Israetel, like full deep stretch. And it's like, there's a time and place, or the Paul Carter where it's like, it's all about the intensity of the contraction. It's like, these are all just trends, and give it 1 to 2 years and we're going to be right back to Arnold style 10 by 10 on squats, you know?
So 2 things based off that. One, I got a bad haircut one day when I was like, I don't know, 14, and I was maybe self-conscious about it. Someone was like, what's the difference between a good haircut and a bad haircut? I was like, I don't know, it's like a couple weeks. And I was like, okay, because like that's almost like what these trends are, is like, it's good press or bad press. It seems like it's only 2 weeks before people forget about it and move on. And then it's cyclical. So when it comes back, people think it's new again because they've already forgotten about it the first time. And I just think that's kind of an interesting thing. The other thing you were talking about, 10 by 10, I'm just gonna share a quick story. I'm a dual citizen. I'm half French, and I was visiting my grandparents in France. I was probably 18 at the time, somewhere around there. And there was a gym that was like quite a bit of distance away because I guess it's not as popular to strength train over there. And so I go all the way to this gym and I pay like a visitor's fee and all that stuff. And they had a trap bar, and I think it was one of my first times seeing a trap bar. So like, okay, and this was 3 by 10 is the most standard one. You know what I mean? So I was like, oh, this is 3 by 10 on the trap bar. And then this like trainer comes up to me and he's like, what are you trying to achieve? And I was like, oh, just get a little bigger, faster, stronger for sports, whatever, right? I had no idea what I wanted to get at, whatever. I may have been 16 even, but he was like, you know, what you need to do if you want to get bigger and stronger is you should do German volume training. You should do 10 by 10. And
you're like, all right.
I was like, sure. Like, you know, how bad could it be? And I thought I was going to die after doing 100 reps of trap bar deadlifts and all that stuff. So anyway, I'm not saying that there's no place for 10 by 10, but, you know, think about it is all I'm going to say before
think
you.
About it. Yep. Think about it. Take a second first. Make sure you know what you're getting into.
It was terrible.
That's hilarious.
All right. So going in a completely different direction now, I wanted to ask you what your hot take is regarding Star Wars, and then what your hot take is regarding superheroes, whether it's Marvel or DC. Do you have any hot take regarding each kind of world?
Man, I would argue that some of the best Star Wars that has been done to date has been more recent and has been less of a huge blockbuster than what the originals and some of the older stuff has been. I think Rogue One and Andor and Clone Wars are amazing stories done almost flawlessly. Maybe I would argue Andor is done flawlessly if you're in it for the long haul. But that definitely throws people off the direction a little bit for Star Wars.
I would say Clone Wars is the best Star Wars thing ever, in my opinion, aside from like the Jar Jar Binks episodes. And then I would say that as far as movies, I've done the ranking before. I say 1 through 6, not 1 through 9, because I don't consider those.
I'm there with you.
But I would say that like I always include Rogue One when I make the list. I won't do Solo because that's just like a forgettable movie. It's not that it was good or bad. It's just the most flawless Star Wars movie. My personal favorite will always be Revenge of the Sith, just because
it's sick. It's what you want. You want lightsabers and violence.
Yeah, that's great. And then I guess it's not really a hot take. It's just something that took me a long time to change my mind on Star Wars wise. Is Obi-Wan was always my favorite, still is. I used to think like Qui-Gon like sucks because like, oh, he got killed by Darth Maul like immediately, and like he's not, you understand the lore of Star Wars a little bit more. He's actually like the wisest Jedi because he saw the fall of the Jedi and all that stuff and the corruption. I was like, okay, he's him, you know. And
dude,
I just thought that was.
Obi-Wan is the epitome of what it is to have, here's like your huge genetic range and just the hard work gone into it. Like when you get into the lore and you're like, that dude did it all. And he's like survived. And he's technically, you know, one of the most powerful simply from the fact of he can do it all and he's survived it all. But yeah, I'm there with you. I agree.
Okay. So you can do Marvel and or DC if you want a hot take there.
I think this is going to be a weird one. I think James Gunn moving over to DC, we're going to see major improvements in the DC quality of movies. I think they're bigger hitters and I think they're going to be amazing. And it's going to start outbeating Marvel as far as the perception of it all. Marvel needs Doomsday to like retcon everything because there's too many shows. You literally have to spend like 32 weeks out of the year to watch everything else that is like, come on, that's too much if you're trying to go to an audience. Like even as like someone who's, I have an entire comic book shelf to my right now that's full, right? As someone like that, I'm not going to watch every single show. I'm not going to watch, like, there's no way. I don't have the time. But Doomsday, hopefully, is going to be amazing. But Marvel's got it in for him because James Gunn is just going to take off DC in their cinematic universe.
All right, response time. I don't fully disagree with that. I would say that I agree. I think Marvel got way too. I don't fully disagree with it. I think Marvel got like way too bloated. Of course, like it's just too much to care about. And I also think that one of the big mistakes that they made is they keep going bigger in scale, but bigger in scale doesn't mean that you're more emotionally attached to it. You can just have like, I don't know, the first Spider-Man movie, Spider-Man Homecoming, where it's like, oh, it's just like a guy and his girlfriend and his dad, and that's like the little conflict there. Just talking in the car, and that seems like to have more weight to it than Kang, for example, talking. It's like, who cares about that, right?
Yeah.
So I think if they actually like Doomsday could be like a way that they say, because the last phase was, after Endgame, I just kind of ignore a lot of the Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
And hopefully going to this less multiversal sort of area, it's still kind of multiversal, might make it better, who knows. But once Disney kind of acquired Star Wars and Marvel, I was like, it felt really hit or miss after that. Not to say that the stuff before, but it's just, but as far as DC, they totally failed. And then they had to like totally start over again, James Gunn and all that stuff. And James Gunn has done well with a lot of his projects. I think that it will add competition. I think that it's good because DC has a lot of really great superheroes. The one thing I'd say is, or this might be a hot take, I don't think it should be, I think the best like movie universe I've seen for superheroes is the DC animated movie universe. DC
dude, so good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, Batman from the 90s, Superman from Justice League. Oh, dude, those three alone.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But I just mean like, even, have you actually seen the DC AMU? It's like the 16 movie like arc. Yeah. Yep. I think that was like, you compare that to like the whole Endgame arc, like they're close, but I actually really liked it. And I actually think Flashpoint Paradox is one of my favorite stories that I've heard in terms of like, I think the Batman twist where Bruce was the one that died in the alley and then the dad became Batman and then mom became the Joker. I was like, this is crazy. So anyway, okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think DC animated. Yeah, I'm on the same page there.
Cool. All right. So if you want to plug yourself, I appreciate the talk. It was a good time. And I'm glad we got a chance to talk nerdy stuff, because that was one of the things I told my wife too, is I was like saying like, oh man, he's like more jacked than me and probably better at jiu-jitsu. But I was like, he even has me beat on like the nerdy stuff too. You know what I mean?
No.
But anyway, if you want to plug yourself, Cody, where can people find you if they want to reach out?
Yep. I'm Cody.prescriptionstrength on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. I'm mainly on Instagram. I'm starting to get more into the TikTok and starting to do more long form videos on YouTube. And then anytime we do those get posted everywhere as well. Yeah, hit me up if you got questions.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Cody.
Yeah, thank you.